Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's Thursday with AARP Wisconsin show. I am your host, Amber Miller, and also a staff member with AARP Wisconsin. So, before we get started with our guest today, just as a friendly reminder, please check out the AARP Wisconsin website at the aarp.org/WI. Has all the information on upcoming virtual events, information about the booster vaccine, Social Security, Medicare, caregiving. There's just an ample amount of information on there that you can check out anytime. Also, please remember AARP Community Connections. This right here not only has the AARP Friendly Voice initiative that I talk about during each episode, but also gives you opportunities to see about volunteer connections within your local area. So you can check on there. You can also create your own group. So if you're thinking about maybe doing neighborhood cleanup, you could register there. So that's at aarpcommunityconnections.org. And even though we're doing a lot in our virtual world, we still love for you to join us to become an AARP Wisconsin volunteer. So if you're interested in presenting, facilitating, advocacy, fraud watch, there's opportunities available. So you can check out at aarp.org/I want, and then the number 2, volunteer. And then you can also find volunteer information on the AARP Wisconsin website, just in case if you're already on there. You just fill out a quick application and it gets sent to us, and then we will contact you to chat further. So we'd love for you to join our team. So just in case you didn't know, September is Intergenerational Month, which kicked off yesterday. So it seemed fitting to invite our guests today for a conversation about all things intergenerational. So I'd love to introduce Miss Eunice Lin Nichols, and she is the Vice President of Innovation at Encoreorg. Hello, Eunice.
Hi, it's so nice to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And I know before the show we were talking a little bit about, and you're in California, so I know it's a little bit earlier there than in the Midwest. So I just appreciate you being on the show today, just talking all about intergenerational. So Eunice, our viewers may not have heard of Encore.org. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Encore.org and also the work that you do.
Absolutely. So Encore.org is a national nonprofit that's dedicated to the idea of what we call co-generation, bringing older and younger people together in ways that are not only mutually beneficial, but that really combine the assets of older and younger people to solve problems, bridge divides, and co-create a better future. There are a lot of ways to tackle society's big problems, but we believe that doing it co-generationally, where younger and older are bringing complementary skill sets and talents to accelerate progress, is one of the best ways to do it. You get those multiple perspectives, and you also get to leverage the assets of both the young and the old, which are often equally discarded in our society, and the solutions are better, and the work is also more meaningful and fun.
And what I appreciate too is when I went onto the Encore.org website and just kind of looking around the website, how there's so much intermingling of the mission of Encore.org and also AARP, not just intergenerational, but a lot to do with livable communities. I know we're going to talk about that a bit later. And also what kind of got me excited is when you were just talking pre-COVID, AARP did Decades Dinner, which is inviting people around the table of all different ages, 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way up to 80, 90, and just hearing the similarities that they have, and also the perspective of what's going on in the world. So I'm excited about this show. So thank you so much. So of course we know since the pandemic started, over a year and a half ago, there's been many changes in intergenerational contacts. So during the pandemic, can you talk a little bit about a few that are striking to you that kind of really stick out?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just say that the pandemic has struck both older and younger generations in really profound ways. And one of the things that Encore does is we track both innovations that are happening, and we spur and catalyze more innovation around co-generational action. And we also try and free up people's imagination so they can actually picture more than the situation they might be living in, which often is actually quite age segregated. So we've seen many in-person kind of site-based intergenerational programs successfully pivot to a more virtual program, including one that is near and dear to my heart, AARP Experience Corps. Talking about AARP, Encore has had connections to AARP for a few decades at the national level, including we piloted a program back when I was 3 years out of college. I ran a program called Experience Corps Bay Area that brought older adults into public schools to tutor and mentor kids and help them read by third grade.
Wow.
That was, for me as a young person, a really profound moment to see the value of older adults, what they can bring into schools, neighborhood adults who many had actually gone to that elementary school generations ago, and then just see the stability and the love and care that they provided. That is a program that grew into a national program in many different cities. AARP at the time was looking for a programmatic venture that AARP members could become involved in. And so, of course, actually a pretty small nonprofit. When it became large, it was very clear to us we needed another partner to take over the program, and AARP raised their hand, and we're so grateful for that. So one example is, this Experience Corps program is a very site-based program for older adults going into schools. I think there's always this misnomer, this misconception that older adults can't learn technology or aren't interested in learning technology. Many Experience Corps sites invested in deep Zoom training for their volunteers and equipped them to continue providing literacy tutoring to students virtually during this time of significant academic upheaval. And I just imagine what it is like to have a child whose life has been upturned. They're now virtual, learning is less engaging, and to be able to jump on a Zoom and see that person, that older adult, that caring kind of grandma or grandfather figure, be in their virtual world with them. So that's an example where training really helped to bring volunteers alongside in this uncertain time. There's another organization, Grandpas United in White Plains, New York, that mobilizes grandpas to show young children that grandpas can be fun too, and actually play a significant role in the lives of young people. They shifted a lot of their intergenerational hangouts online, did Zoom field trips like to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so they had to think creatively about how to shift even activities to that virtual format. And I'll name one more organization, Oasis. They launched a virtual senior center called Oasis Everywhere, which offers technology education classes to help older people avoid isolation during the pandemic, which has been so important. They have classes on kind of basic cybersecurity, as well as courses on the alarming growth of internet fraud and things like that, that often specifically target older adults. So moving some of that online, giving it access to older adults and creating a sense of community has been another important way that organizations have pivoted.
And great, thank you. And if you're just joining us today, our guest is Eunice Lin Nichols with Encoreorg. And September, as of yesterday, was Intergenerational Month, which you may not have even known that. So that's what we're discussing today. If you have any questions or comments for Eunice or myself, you could please put them in the chat box below, and we'll get to them shortly. Eunice, what I love is all the programs that you were talking about, but the Grandpas United sticks out to me a little bit. But I did not grow up with grandparents. And everybody, when you hear stories, when my friends tell stories, I'm like, well, I wish I would have had grandparents. And just, you just kind of get a different feel. And last week, there's a local program here in Milwaukee that's like foster grandparents that's similar to Grandpas United, where they train quote unquote like quasi grandparents to like connect with children in the area, and how great it has been to have that kind of missing grandparent figure and how that can like change your whole life. So I love that you're talking about these programs. I think they could be life-changing, especially to somebody who doesn't have that in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of the foster grandparent program and that one-on-one connection, so important. And I think whether somebody like you grew up without their grandparents, or we have, I worked when I was in San Francisco with a lot of children who are children of immigrants who culturally are very close to their grandparents, but often their grandparents were living in another country. And so how do you recreate that sense of extended family in a school or community setting? Foster grandparent program is one way to do that.
And if we are, this show streams throughout the whole Wisconsin. If people are interested in learning more, should they go to the Encoreorg website for information, or should they go to the specific websites that you were talking about for programs?
Encore is really where we describe ourselves as like a catalyzer of imagination and innovation. If they go to our website, it's a great starting portal to find many things, including resources. For Wisconsin, they'll probably have to do a bit of deep dive research into what's happening in Wisconsin. But there, as you mentioned, Foster Grandparent Program runs their Oasis Everywhere is a national virtual platform. So I'll flag if these are things that are accessible everywhere. Yeah.
And then, Eunice, so I know some organizations experienced a surge of innovation as a result of the problems generated by the pandemic that started last year and other crises, of course. What are some innovations that rose during the time that show what's possible when older and younger generations can come together?
Yeah, well, one of the things I've really appreciated about AARP is that they really focus on these 8 domains of livability, and that includes respect, social inclusion, social participation. As we were talking earlier, the pandemic really hit on all of those things, especially the social isolation and the lack of people to participate in community life. We actually, Encore, we launched a brand new fellowship. We called it the Gen to Gen or Generation to Generation Innovation Fellowship a few months after the pandemic started. We actually thought about, like many people, delaying it. But the whole purpose of this fellowship was to invest in innovators who are bringing older and younger together to do important things out in the community. And we thought, there's never been a more important time to invest in innovators than now, when it feels like society is starting to fray around the edges on connection. And so we supported 15 innovators over the course of 9 months, right in the heart of the pandemic. It was a virtual fellowship because it needed to be. We had 3 fellows that launched brand new initiatives out of the pandemic. One is Aditi Merchant. She is a college student at UT Austin. Her life was disrupted. She and her peers are feeling really lonely. And they had the thought that there were probably a lot of older adults that were lonely out there. They started an online platform called Big and Mini that connects virtually an older person with a young person anywhere in the country for conversation and friendship. And the stories that have come out of that have been just wonderful. You can find more about Aditi in our Innovation Fellowships page on our website. Donna Griffin is another young woman who built something called Eldera, kind of the era of the elders. And it's a global village that, once again, uses really simple to use technology that connects older adults who can help tutor and mentor children anywhere. And so that's also been a wonderful way of connecting people in a more global village. And I'll say one last person, Rowena Ritchie, is an artist and an educator. And she created the most beautiful program that allowed younger artists who, all of a sudden, as we know, the art world, the music world got decimated in the pandemic. And there were young artists that needed work and a creative platform. And she had the idea of connecting them with older, chronically isolated adults to meet with them, hear their stories, and then deliver a creative gift that they could give to that elder through the storytelling. And I actually think you've queued up a video of Rowena's story, which is really amazing.
Great. A 7-year-old boy places his hand on a piece of red felt, traces it, then cuts around it and carefully stitches it to a pillow. During the pandemic, his grandmother had to give up all physical contact with him and everyone else. And so Wakes made her this pillow. And whenever they would talk on the phone, she would place her hand over his pillow hand, a proxy and a promise of hand-holding to come. My name is Rowena Ritchie, and that is the true story of Wakes Wilner and his grandmother, Sook. Wakes' mom is my dear friend, Erica Chong Shuk, and we're in a performance collective together with our friend Ryan Takata were called For You. Inspired by Wakes' hand pillow, For You launched a project called Artists and Elders to serve as matchmakers, pairing elders with artists one-on-one. The two meet and get to know each other, and then the artist makes a gift for and with the elder. Sounds simple, right? But our goals are profound. We're tackling two problems. First is the social isolation of elders, which reached crisis levels during the pandemic. Second is the need to support artists, a critical resource to communicate care, creativity, and connection. One artist in San Francisco, Deirdre Visser, was paired with elder Glenn Stoltz. Because of COVID-19, Glenn couldn't get out, so he would go to his windows to draw. When Deirdre first met Glenn, she said she could sense right away that the best gift she could deliver him was her sustained interest in his art and creative practice. And so, Deirdre helped Glenn mount his first ever public exhibit titled Out My Window, a collection of original paintings by Glenn Stoltz, age 79. The generosity and creativity of all the elders and artists have astounded us. You can see the gifts and creative process on our website. For Suk, Wakes' grandmother, the social isolation was lifted, but for countless others, it is not limited to the pandemic. Deep down, we all want to see and be seen. We all want to feel heard. We all want to give gifts and to receive them. We want someone to say, this is for you.
First of all, I love that video. And it got me thinking about some TikToks that I've been watching. One specifically, there's a grandson that made his grandma a TikTok page, and she is a great artist, and I believe she's in her mid-70s, and how much it has blown up, and now she just started her own Etsy store.
Wow.
And they showed her on the phone with her friend saying, like, she's just in awe that people would even appreciate her artwork. So when I'm watching this video, it just shows isolation was an issue before COVID.
Yeah.
And you know that. I think a lot of people know that. I think COVID brought it to the forefront of like, what can we do? But the intergenerational piece, just that video and the pictures of people playing instruments together and just chatting with each other in art, I just think is terrific.
Yeah, I think that when I watch that video, what strikes me is the generosity of spirit on both sides, that there's so much to give. I think the public in general has been aware of the social and isolation of older adults. And in some ways, there's a narrative that they're the ones who are lonely. And I think the pandemic has highlighted that young people are actually even more lonely than older adults. And it's like we have these two generations that could be each other's solutions if we had ways to actually bring them together in a society that is structured to be pretty segregated. And so that's where our passion at Encore comes from in terms of innovation and imagination, but also artists and creatives like Rowena or Aditi or Donna or others who've been part of our fellowship and beyond are the ones who are offering up other formats for engaging, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. And Eunice, it looks like we do have a question from Jim. It says, how can you motivate young people to create innovations that help older people and also vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, as I mentioned, I think the pandemic has been interesting because it's allowed young people to experience firsthand some of the challenges and barriers that older adults increasingly face as they become more isolated. And it's been a visceral, like, wow, they're just in it. What happens if you can't leave your home? What happens if you lose your network of friends? What happens if you can't just go out and do the things that you would have normally done? And so I think, to me, the answer begins with empathy. How do we get young people to actually take a few steps in somebody else's shoes. And this is a moment that we should seize. And so whether it be somebody like a DT merchant at UT Austin sitting there being like, wow, she's young, she has creative energy, she has other students who have technology skills. Together, they can actually create some new things. I think that's a starting place. I think the second is we've seen a shift in how universities and schools educate kids. How can we bring older adults into classrooms? There are some universities that are actually co-learning, co-teaching with older adults alongside young people. In particular, hopefully we hope increasingly seeing that in the healthcare sector, where young people being trained to be medical professionals. What would it be like if you either had older adults in the classroom, so you're not talking about gerontology for older people, you actually have the lived experience of older adults in the classroom as well, or practicums where when you're placed, you actually aren't just learning, but you're actually going out and serving older adults at the same time. Almost all of the really young innovators we see in high school or middle school or before had significant touch points with older people. They volunteered in local senior homes. They had grandparents who were important in their lives, or they felt a big lack of that and then went out looking for it. So I just think the more we can do to cross-pollinate experiences when people are younger, the better. The fact that I was 23 when I ran Experience Corps and was surrounded by 200 older adults, none of my peers were living in that world. But I, after that, couldn't imagine working any other way. It shifted my entire desire for a work environment that would have older and younger together.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim, for that question. Eunice, where would you like to see more intergenerational innovation, bringing like older and younger generations together for the greater good?
That's a great question. You know, actually, Encore recently we hosted a 13-part series in the Stanford Social Innovation Review on the need for more intergenerational innovation. And this 13-part essay tackles housing and national service and social isolation and loneliness. I think in the process of curating these articles, it reinforced our belief that there's no challenge where an intergenerational lens can't be incredibly powerful. One that we've been thinking a bit about at Encore is just how segregated movements for change are in our country. Climate change, as an example, we tend to think that there are a bunch of young people who care about climate change. There are actually a lot of older adults who deeply care about the state of our planet, but they're not always working together. Same with the movements for social justice. We have civil rights greats that led us in an earlier generation, and then a lot of young people over here who feel deeply passionate about it. We're interested in formats that could actually bring those change agents together to collaborate on solutions. So I think there's a lot of room for innovation in those areas.
And Eunice, I know we're going to be closing out our show soon. As soon as we end this, I'm going to go back on the Encore website and even do more digging than I already have, just because it sounds like there's so much great information. So how has the last year changed your perception about the need for intergenerational programs?
Well, we've touched upon this in some ways already, but I feel like we're in a unique moment where an entire generation of young people are being shaped by COVID-19. And we have to care about who we're becoming as a society as we emerge from this crisis, or just learn to live with this state of affairs. I have 2 children myself, middle school and high school, and they have a high schooler who had his freshman year completely virtually. And I'm thinking about the ways his life is shaped as his world in some way became smaller. And in other ways, because he's online so much, it has become much bigger. And so the things I care about now are, in this moment, are my children seeing the assets of older adults, not just the frailty. Like, we need to care about the decimation of older adults and their health for sure, but our kids need to see more than that. And sometimes I'm worried that the biggest thing they see in the news and what they are seeing in their neighborhoods is one narrative, when in fact, retired doctors were called back into service to actually be able to support COVID vaccinations and the influx of people in hospitals, retired nurses, other medical professionals. We've seen the expertise of older adults come into struggling nonprofits to support them in strategic planning, in technology support, in all manner of ways. And I think what we're seeing is also the ways in which the workplace has needed to become more flexible for older adults who might want and not need or want to work full time. Young people are starting to demand that because they're like, this was not even a healthy way to live, to be so work focused in this manner. Once again, the bookends of our generations are pushing us to be more inclusive and to live in a more healthy way. So for me, the pandemic has caused me to say, how do we think about the narratives that the young are seeing? And we have a unique opportunity to make sure older adults are also seeing young people as a significant part of keeping them engaged, active, and passing on their legacy.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. We have one more question, Eunice, that I'd like to ask. Okay, from Arlene, how do you get past the barrier of lack of internet for low-income adults and children who are isolated? So it's that lack of technology kind of seems to be an issue.
Yeah, that is really important. I think there are a couple, well, there are many components to that, and I am by no means a technology expert. But I think one answer is we can't go fully towards technology, but we need to be able to get access to technology to all people. I think that's just the society we live in. If we don't do that, we're leaving so many people behind. So that includes a couple components. One is many of the nonprofits we have been tracking or working with have had a big focus on getting technology into older and younger people's hands. And so that might look like getting donations of iPads or of laptops or Chromebooks. So one, like you have to get the physical hardware there. The second one is just connectivity. Some programs have also had to make sure that people can access the internet and to get them those devices too. And then the training component. So organizations like Oasis that care about and know and have expertise in how to train older adults simultaneously. It's sort of like as they're using the technology, they're learning how to use it as well. It can be very frustrating. I'll say the last thing is mobilizing young people to be a workforce, to in-person and or virtually train older adults. There's a group called Generation Tech. That's a group of high schoolers in Colorado that launched a nonprofit out of their high school to go into senior centers and actually train them in the use of technology, just to help them get onto virtual platforms with their grandkids, to help them know how to be able to do virtual grocery shopping or to be able to help them navigate. And there's that in-person relational component that makes it so much more than just tech support. So I do think mobilizing young people to go in physically to support and getting donations and access to technology those are two really important pieces.
Great. Eunice, thank you so much. This was super informative, gets me just thinking about maybe what I can do just in my community a little bit better, thinking about intergenerational. I'm going to put up the Encore, or I'm going to have Darian put up the Encore website one more time. Once again, as Eunice said, this is probably the best way to kind of start thinking about if there's stuff within people's areas and more information about Encore.org. Would that be correct? Or any last words, Eunice?
Nope, just encouragement for, we live, you might look around you and say, there are no young people that live near me or they're intersecting in my life. As with all aspects of diversity, sometimes you have to look for it and open your eyes. You might be surprised where there are actually young people right there who would love to interact with you. And I just encourage you to take that step to both be generous and to just step out of your comfort zone and connect.
Great. Thank you so much, Eunice. This was super informative, and I think it really kicked off for Intergenerational Month. So thank you again for being on the show today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And for next week's show, we will be joined by our advocacy team who will be talking about, I want to make sure I say it right. Thank you. The vaccine booster information. I know there's a lot of questions out there about who should get it, when I should get it, how will I know about it? So that will be next Thursday. We'll be joined by Lisa Lampkins with AARP Wisconsin. We also have some upcoming events. So virtual events, the 8th, which is next week, we're going to be talking about Medicare initial enrollment. Also Wednesday the 8th, but in the afternoon, it's all going to be about how music shapes the brain. Thursday the 9th, if you're looking possibly to start your own business after the age of 50, great information there through our friends over at Fox Valley Technical College. And then Thursday the 16th will be live trivia. You can get all that information on the AARP website or the phone number below. Please also remember Small Dollar Big Impact. Our application is due September 15th. And once again, those are for grants up to $1,000 of creative, fun, outside the box thinking of ways that you can impact your community. So if you would like to learn more about that, please visit aarp.org/WI, and then it's SDBI, which stands for Small Dollar Big Impact. The application's on there, and also past winners. So if you'd like to see who won, you can do that. But I want to thank again, Eunice. Thank you so much. Great information. And I want to thank our viewers today. Please make sure to share this on your page. We want to make sure that people are getting this type of information in their hands. But until then, until next Thursday, please be safe and we'll see you soon.